My brother disappeared, and I'm starting to realize my perfect sister might not be who I thought she was. I've never written anything like this before, but lately, the silence in my house feels like it's pressing on me. I keep hearing echoes of conversations that never really happened, things I wish I'd said to my brother, things I wish I hadn't said to my sister. Maybe this is just my way of trying to make sense of it all. I'm the middle child, always have been, always felt like it. My older sister, Clara, was born glowing. That's how my mom used to put it. Clara came into this world with a halo around her. She was the kind of kid teachers loved, neighbors admired, and relatives compared their own children to. Straight A's, polite, graceful, and most importantly to our parents, obedient. Then there was me. And then there was Theo. The golden girl. When I say Clara was perfect, I don't mean in a casual "oh, she's good at school" way. I mean she built her whole identity on being flawless. She never broke a rule. Never got a bad grade. Never rolled her eyes when my mom said something dumb or complained when my dad forgot another birthday. She wore that perfection like armor. Our parents adored her. They didn't even try to hide it. At family dinners, Mom would ask Clara about her grades, her projects, her plans for the future. I'd sit there, stabbing my green beans, waiting for someone to ask me something. Theo would already be gone by then, probably outside kicking rocks down the driveway or hiding in the shed, pretending to smoke rolled up leaves like cigarettes. It wasn't like I didn't love Clara. I did. She was my big sister. She used to braid my hair when we were little and tuck me in when I had nightmares. But as we got older, that kindness felt calculated. Like she knew she was being watched all the time, and she wanted to make sure her audience saw her best angles. And honestly, I think Theo saw it too. The problem child, Theo, was 4 years younger than me, and he came out swinging. He was loud, impulsive, and constantly in trouble. He got detention in middle school for fighting. He got caught stealing a bottle of vodka from the grocery store when he was 15. My parents called him ungrateful, lazy, and a disappointment. But I saw a different version of him. The one who used to bring me coffee in the mornings when I was cramming for finals. The one who sat next to me in the hospital waiting room when our dog got hit by a car, even though he was trying not to cry. He cared. He just didn't know how to fit into the world that adored Clara and tolerated me. By the time Clara left for college, our house felt emptier and louder at the same time. My mom cried every day for a week after she moved out. My dad bought her a gold bracelet with Clara's initials on it. Theo stopped coming home for dinner. I was 17 then, old enough to notice things my parents didn't. Like how Mom's eyes would go glassy whenever Theo talked back. Or how Dad started locking the liquor cabinet after one particularly bad argument. Clara came home for holidays, bringing expensive gifts and a boyfriend who looked like he'd been printed from a catalog. Everyone fussed over her. She had stories about college parties and internships, about professors who said she was exceptional. Theo barely looked up from his phone. It was like our family was two halves of a broken mirror, one side blindingly polished, the other cracked and sharp. And I was stuck in the middle, trying to keep both pieces from cutting me open. Theo disappeared 3 months ago. It was a Thursday night, I remember because I had an early shift the next morning. Mom was watching TV, Dad was already in bed, and Theo was in the garage, tinkering with his old dirt bike. He'd been trying to fix it for weeks, though I don't think he even planned to ride it. It was more of a project, something to keep his hands busy. At around 10:30 p.m., I heard the bike start. It coughed and sputtered, but then the engine caught, and I heard him shout, not words, just that triumphant sound he made when something finally worked. I smiled to myself and went back to scrolling through my phone. That was the last time I ever heard his voice in the house. When Theo didn't come home by morning, Mom thought he'd crashed at a friend's. Dad rolled his eyes and muttered something about that boy learning his lesson. But by the second day, when his phone went straight to voicemail and none of his friends had seen him, the panic started to set in. The police were called. Flyers were printed. A detective came by and asked questions that made my mom sob and my dad furious. And Clara came home. She arrived like a storm, organized, controlled, and almost too calm. She hugged Mom, promised she'd handle things, and took over the whole operation like she was the main character in some tragic drama. I wanted to be grateful. I really did. But something about it felt off. It started small. Clara told the police Theo had been acting strange, that he'd talked about running away or starting over. I remember staring at her, because I'd never heard him say that. Ever. He'd been frustrated, sure, mostly about Mom and Dad riding him constantly, but he'd just gotten a new job at a local auto shop. He seemed better. Then there was her story about the last time she talked to him. She said he'd called her 2 nights before he vanished, asking for advice. But when I checked his phone records later, something about that claim gnawed at me. There was no call to Clara. When I asked her about it, she smiled, that same perfect smile she's had since she was a kid, and said, "Oh, maybe he used a friend's phone. You know how he is." And maybe she was right. Maybe. But then there were more things. Like how she seemed to know details before the police told us. Or how she avoided looking at the photos of him they put up around town. Or how she'd go quiet every time someone mentioned the garage, where Theo had been that last night. A week after his disappearance, I went into Theo's room. It felt wrong, like trespassing, but I needed something. Some clue, some piece of him. The air still smelled like his cologne and engine oil. I found a notebook under his bed. It wasn't a diary exactly, more like a collection of thoughts, song lyrics, sketches, rants. Most of it was random, but there was one page that made my stomach drop. She thinks she can fix everything. But some things shouldn't be fixed. Some things need to break. No name. No date. But something about it, the way she was underlined twice, made my skin crawl. I've never shown it to anyone. Not even the police. Yesterday, I caught Clara in the garage. She said she was looking for closure. That she wanted to see the last place he'd been. But when I asked what she was holding, she hid it behind her back. It was one of Theo's old wrenches, the one with his initials scratched into the handle. She smiled and said, he would have wanted me to have something to remember him by. Then she put it in her bag and left. I stood there for a long time after she drove off, staring at the empty spot on the shelf where the wrench had been. And I realized something I'd never let myself think before. I don't know who my sister really is. It's strange how quiet a house can become after someone vanishes. It's not just silence, it's the absence of presence. You start to realize how many small sounds one person brings to a space, the slam of a bedroom door, the squeak of sneakers on tile, the constant hum of their music bleeding through the wall. Theo's absence was a hole that noise couldn't fill. Mom stopped watching TV. Dad stopped talking. Even the fridge seemed to buzz quieter. I started sleeping with my bedroom door open, not because I was afraid of being alone, but because I kept thinking I'd hear the dirt bike again, that rough, uneven sound of an engine trying to stay alive. But it never came. The police came often at first. 2 detectives, a tall man with tired eyes named Keenan, and a woman with a soft voice named Patel. They asked the same questions in slightly different ways. When did you last see Theo? Did he ever talk about running away? Was he having problems with anyone? They tried to sound patient, but I could see the exhaustion setting in after the first week. Missing teenage boys didn't get the same kind of urgency missing girls did. Especially not boys with a record. Clara answered every question calmly, like she'd rehearsed her responses. He was troubled, she'd say, but he had a good heart. When Detective Patel asked about the night Theo disappeared, Clara's eyes glistened perfectly, like she knew just how much emotion to show without letting it get messy. I stumbled through my answers, afraid of saying something wrong. I didn't want to make Theo look worse, but I didn't want to lie either. The more I talked, the more it sounded like I didn't know my brother at all. And maybe I didn't. A week later, they brought in dogs. They searched the woods behind our property, the creek, even the old quarry where Theo used to hang out with his friends. Nothing. But they lingered on the garage longer than I expected. It's small, detached, always smelling faintly of gasoline and pine needles. Theo spent most of his time there, tinkering or sketching on the old workbench Dad built before I was born. When the officers left, the space looked wrong. They'd moved things around, opened drawers, pulled boxes off shelves. It felt violated. I went in the next morning to clean up and noticed something strange, a square of floor under the bench that was cleaner than the rest. The concrete around it was stained and dusty, but that one section looked scrubbed. Recently. It made no sense. Theo wasn't the type to clean anything, least of all the floor. I told myself maybe Clara had done it, maybe she'd been in there looking for clues, trying to help. But the thought stuck to me like static. Mom started breaking apart piece by piece. She'd wander through the house like a ghost, whispering Theo's name under her breath. Sometimes she'd stand by the window for hours, waiting for headlights that never came up the drive. Dad, on the other hand, got meaner. He drank more. Yelled louder. Once, I heard him slam something against the wall in the kitchen. When I came downstairs, Clara was standing there, her arms crossed, calm as ever, while Dad's face was red with anger. "I told you not to talk to the police without us present," he said. "I didn't," Clara replied evenly. "They called me. I can't control that." Dad pointed at her. "You think you're in charge here? You think because you went to college, you know everything." She didn't flinch. "Someone has to handle things while you're drunk." He hit the counter so hard the salt shaker exploded. I froze on the stairs. Clara looked up, met my eyes, and gave me this small, careful smile, the same one she used when we were kids, and she wanted me to pretend everything was fine. I turned and went back to my room. The next week, Detective Keenan called me privately. He said there had been new information, not much, but enough to keep the case open. They'd found Theo's dirt bike abandoned near the edge of the old quarry trail, about 2 miles from our house. The gas tank was empty. The tires were muddy. And the chain had been snapped clean through. They said it looked like someone had used a tool, not wear and tear. The strange part? No footprints around it. Just tire tracks leading up to the spot, and none leaving. Keenan asked if Theo had enemies, or anyone who might have wanted to hurt him. I almost said Clara's name. The word sat at the back of my throat like a stone. But instead, I said, no. Not really. He nodded, wrote something down, and said, "We're not ruling anything out." When I got home that night, Clara was in the kitchen making tea. The smell of chamomile and lemon filled the room, masking something sharper, bleach, maybe. She smiled when she saw me. "You look tired." "Detective called," I said. "They found Theo's bike." Her hand paused mid-air, spoon clinking lightly against the cup. "Oh. At the quarry." She nodded slowly, eyes unreadable. "That's good. Maybe it's a lead." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then I saw it, the bag sitting on the counter next to her purse. The same leather tote she'd had in the garage. The edge of something metal poked out from inside. "Theo's wrench," I said before I could stop myself. She froze. Then smiled, that same perfect, gentle smile. "You're imagining things." I put it back. But when she left for work the next morning, I checked the garage again. The wrench was gone. I started dreaming about Theo. Sometimes he was still a kid, chasing me through the backyard, laughing. Other nights, he was older, his hands covered in grease, staring at me with something like disappointment. Once, he said, "You're not looking in the right place." I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. The next morning, I couldn't shake the dream. I went to the garage again and sat by the workbench. For a while, I just stared at the clean square on the floor, trying to figure out why it felt so wrong. And then I noticed the faintest crack along the edge, thin, almost invisible, but definitely there. Like something had been pried up and put back down. My hands started shaking. I grabbed a screwdriver and wedged it into the line. It took a few tries, but the corner lifted, revealing a loose concrete slab no bigger than a shoebox lid. Underneath was a plastic bag. I didn't open it right away. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at it. I could hear the clock ticking in the house, every second echoing louder than the last. Finally, I pulled it out and unzipped it. Inside were papers, receipts, letters, photos. The first thing I saw was a printout of an email. From Theo to Clara. You don't get to control me. I'm not your project. Stop pretending you care. It was dated 3 days before he vanished. There were others, a receipt from a hardware store for cleaning supplies and bleach. A photo of Theo's dirt bike with the back tire missing. And a crumpled sticky note that said, "He knows." That was it. No signature, no date, no context. Just those 2 words. I don't know how long I sat there, trying to make sense of it. My mind kept looping through possibilities. What if it was nothing? What if Clara had been trying to help him? What if this was all just a misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That night, I drove to Clara's apartment. She'd moved out again after things got too tense at home, but she still came by every few days to check in. When she opened the door, she looked genuinely surprised to see me. "Everything okay?" I held up the bag. Why was this under the garage floor? For the first time in my life, Clara didn't have an immediate answer. Her face went pale, her lips parted slightly. Then, just like that, she recovered, smoothing her hair, forcing a smile. "You went through Theo's stuff?" "Don't do that," I said. "Don't make it about me." She sighed. "You don't understand. He was spiraling. He came to me for help." "So you buried his emails and receipts in the floor?" Her expression hardened. "I was protecting him." "From what?" She didn't answer. She just whispered, "You shouldn't have found that," and closed the door in my face. I drove home shaking. My brain felt like it was splitting open under the weight of too many questions. Why hide those papers? What did he knows mean? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made me flinch. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft, measured, deliberate. But when I got up to check, the hall was empty. Then, just as I was closing my door again, I saw a shadow outside, someone standing by the garage. I ran downstairs, heart pounding, but by the time I got there, the yard was empty. The only sign anyone had been there was the faint smell of bleach drifting out of the open garage door. I didn't tell anyone about the bleach in the air or the shadow by the garage. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, for proof that didn't sound like paranoia. The truth was simpler. I was scared of hearing what the proof would say out loud. For the next 2 days, time lost its edges. I went to work, nodded when people said they were so sorry, then came home and stared at the garage from my window like it would confess if I watched long enough. The bag I'd found under the slab, the emails, the receipts, the sticky note that said "he knows," sat under a towel in my closet, as if hiding it from sight could change what it meant. On the 3rd night, sleep finally dragged me under. I dreamed that I was back in the garage with Theo. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, turning that wrench with his initials scratched into it like a rosary. "You always think I'm behind you," he said, not looking up. "You never check above." I woke up with a start, the dream like an echo that hadn't finished speaking. It was still dark, the gray before morning, and the house was holding its breath. I shoved my feet into sneakers and went outside in my pajama bottoms. The grass was wet and cold. Damp air clung to my throat. The garage door squealed as I lifted it. I flicked on the light and stood in that familiar smell: oil, dust, a ghost of bleach. Things were where I'd left them after the search, boxes stacked, the workbench cleared except for a coffee can full of screws and a cracked mason jar with washers. The concrete slab I'd pried up lay back in its place like a scab. Above, I said to no one. I scanned the rafters. Cobwebs swayed. An old fishing pole warped with age. The bare bulb threw a halo on the ceiling, and then I saw it, a small metal tin wired to a joist, the kind cough drops used to come in. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it. Even looking for it, my eyes skittered away at first, like my mind kept insisting it was just a shadow. I dragged over a stool and climbed carefully. The wood creaked. My fingertips were shaking by the time I unwound the thin wire. Inside the tin were two things, a SIM card and a tiny folded scrap of paper. The paper said, in Theo's rushed handwriting, "If you're reading this, you found the floor. You're getting warmer, Sparrow. Put the card in. Listen. Then decide." Sparrow. His nickname for me from when we were little, after a field trip where I memorized every bird call and then refused to stop making them at dinner. He used to whistle and say, "Come on, Sparrow, guide me home." I went back to my room before the house woke up and dug through a drawer until I found my old cracked phone. The battery was swollen, the screen was spidered with lines, it still turned on. I popped out my own SIM and slid Theo's in with hands that didn't feel attached to me. The phone breathed itself to life slowly. A text thread materialized with a contact name saved as Wrench. Then a single audio file notification appeared above it, time-stamped at 11:58 p.m. the night he disappeared. For a minute I just stared at the phone, thumb hovering over the play button. I felt the weight of 1,000 conversations we'd never had, of every time I'd said it's not a good time and believed I was protecting myself from something, disappointment, conflict, grief. And maybe I had been. But there's a way self-protection turns into self-betrayal so quietly you don't hear it until it wraps around your throat. I pressed play. At first there was only a rush of wind and the sound of his breath. Then Theo's voice, low and clipped, like he was afraid of being overheard. "Sparrow, it's me. I don't have time to explain everything. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay, but I need a head start. She's not, she thinks she's saving me. She won't stop. She told the shop I was stealing to force a wake-up call. Got me fired. She snapped the chain on the bike to make me talk to her. She said it wasn't safe to ride anyway, that she'd rather I had a controlled fall with her there. She doesn't understand that control is the thing that's killing me." My mouth went dry. The room tilted. "I know you think I'm reckless, but I planned this." Left the bike. Took the creek bed to the quarry trail, then cut across the shale where footprints don't hold. I've got my bag stashed. Wrench is giving me a ride to a place I can crash for a bit. Don't call Mom and Dad yet. They'll make it about Clara and it'll turn into a war. Please don't tell Clara. She'll drag the police into it to prove she's the hero. I just need time to breathe." He paused. Somewhere in the background a car door thumped shut. A man's voice said something I couldn't make out. "If you want to see me, wait 3 nights. Midnight. You'll know where. If you don't come, I get it. You've always been in the middle, and I put you there again. But, you're the only one who doesn't need me to be a story. You just let me be a person. That's why I'm telling you. I love you, Sparrow. Don't let her turn this into a lesson." The recording ended with a rush of static and the click of a lighter, even though he hardly smoked anything except nerves. I sat there with the phone in my lap, the world very far away and very close at the same time. I wanted to be furious. With Clara, with myself, with the universe that rewards perfection so loudly you can't hear anyone else. But under the anger, there was something else, a thread of relief pulled through my chest. He'd planned it. He was alive. He had asked for me. 3 nights. Midnight. You'll know where. I did know. In the way you know a childhood secret no one else could guess. There's an old iron bridge over the creek behind our house, half choked by sumac and vines. When we were kids, we used to wedge a coffee can under the railing and leave notes in it, bring gummy worms. Mom's mad. Hide in tree fort. Later, when we learned to keep secrets that mattered, it became something else. A place to leave apologies too raw for the kitchen, requests too fragile for the living room. After our dog died, Theo had taped a Polaroid of the two of them to the underside of the bridge and written "I'm still your boy" on the back. I knew where. I just didn't know who I'd be when I got there. At dinner I watched Clara slice roasted carrots into perfect angles while Mom twitched like a bird in a glass box and Dad drank water like it was whiskey, like he could will it into something stronger. Any updates? Mom asked, voice frayed. Clara set down her knife, laid her hand over Mom's, and said gently, "The police are doing everything they can." I said nothing. I felt the SIM card like a live wire in my old phone upstairs. After the dishes, Clara followed me into the hallway. "You're quiet." "Am I?" I said. She tilted her head the way she did when she was trying to see the shape of a lie. "You've been going through Theo's things," she said softly. "You shouldn't. It isn't healthy." "What isn't healthy," I said, "is hiding emails under the floor." Her eyes flashed. She looked, for a second, like the mask was too tight. "You don't understand what he's like when he spirals." "I understand what you're like when he won't be your project." She stepped closer. Her perfume smelled like clean linen with a razor blade tucked inside. "I know you're hurting. But please don't make this harder. The police are looking at every angle. They asked me to stay available. It would help if you didn't spread rumors fueled by grief. You told the shop he was stealing." Her smile didn't move, but something in it died. "He needed consequences. You snapped his chain." Her throat worked. "He was going to ride drunk." "He wasn't." "You don't know that." I stared at her. We'd been orbiting each other our whole lives, her the sun my parents spun around, me the moon pretending I didn't care about tides. In that moment I saw the gravity for what it was. Not light. Pull. "Clara," I said, "I think you love him in a way that leaves no room for him." She took a breath like she was about to argue, then let it out slowly, eyes shining but not yet wet. "I'm trying to make sure he survives his bad decisions." "Sometimes the decision isn't bad," I said. "It's just not yours." Something flickered across her face, something like fear. "Don't go meeting strange people in the middle of the night chasing ghosts," she said. "It isn't safe." My heart slammed once, hard. She didn't know about the bridge. She was guessing, the way people guess when they don't believe other people have private places they can't reach. "I won't," I said. Her smile snapped back on perfectly. "Good," she whispered, and touched my shoulder like a blessing and a warning. 3 nights after the recording, midnight, I slipped out to the creek. The air was cold enough to bite. The hum of the highway was a faraway animal. My phone's flashlight carved pale bones into the weeds as I picked my way along the path. The old iron bridge squatted over the water, black and stubborn. Rust had chewed at its sides. The creek gargled to itself, unimpressed by human drama. Under the railing, where we used to leave notes, a coffee can waited. My breath fogged the metal as I pulled it free. Inside was a folded bandana, and inside the bandana a key fob, the cheap kind you get from a storage facility. A scrap of paper. Unit 32B. East Side Lockup. Dawn. Come alone. I looked around, ridiculous in the way fear makes you, as if the air itself could be watching. The only eyes on me belonged to a raccoon, who blinked once and ambled away like this was all beneath him. At home, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling until the gray seeped back into the world. I left a note on the kitchen table, taking a drive. Clear my head. Back later. That I knew would cause a fight and couldn't care. East Side lockup sat on the edge of town like a row of closed mouths. The manager's bell didn't work. I waited by the gate until a contractor let me in with a wave. Unit 32B was halfway down, its doors scratched with initials I didn't recognize. My hands shook so hard I dropped the fob twice before I got it into the slot. The roll-up door clattered open. Inside, a cat, a space heater, a duffel bag, a milk crate with instant ramen and a jar of peanut butter, and Theo, thinner, eyes bigger in his face, hair too long, alive. He didn't smile at first. We just stood there staring at each other like we were trying to memorize a language we used to speak. "Hey, Sparrow," he said finally. My throat closed. "You idiot," I said, and then I was hugging him too hard, the smell of him, soap, dust, motor oil, hitting me like a memory you thought you'd put away neatly and then you open the drawer and everything spills out. He hugged me back and something shaking in him steadied. "I'm sorry," he muttered into my shoulder. "I didn't want to make you lie." "I haven't yet," I said. The word yet hung there like a decision we hadn't made. He pulled back and looked past me into the light as if expecting someone else. "You came alone?" "Yes." His shoulders dropped. "Thank you." I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, to demand 1,000 answers. Instead I sat on the crate and rubbed at my temple as if I could press the future into a shape that wouldn't cut. "Tell me everything." He did. Clara had called his boss twice in the same week, pretending to be a concerned sibling and implying Theo was high on the job. The shop owner started counting the register more often. When a miscount turned up, probably a simple mistake, Theo said, the new kid never balanced right, it became a story Clara could use. "He needs consequences," she'd said when he confronted her, a phrase that sounded like she'd practiced it in the mirror until it fit. She'd shown up at the garage with that practiced grief face and stood over him like he was a science experiment. "You don't have to become this person," she'd said gently, the way some people set down a knife. He'd snapped. They'd yelled. She'd left. He'd worked on the bike until the engine purred. When he reached for the chain to check the tension, he felt the burrs where it had been cut and fitted back together loosely. Sloppy. He'd known what it would do under stress. He'd also known who had been there long enough to do it and feel righteous about calling it a safety intervention. He'd planned the creek route weeks before. He'd asked Wrench, whose real name was Marco, a mechanic at the shop who'd left after a fight with the owner, to stash a bag for him and give him a lift at midnight. "Every family needs a pressure valve," Marco had said, handing over the key fob. "This is yours. Use it if she doesn't let up." "Why the bleach?" I asked. He looked away. I spilled some cleaning the floor. There was oil everywhere. I didn't want the cops thinking I burned the place down. Then when I came back for the last of my stuff, I guess I overdid it. Paranoid. "Sorry." "And the bag in the floor?" His mouth twisted. "Insurance." I knew if this went sideways, I'd need proof I wasn't crazy. That she'd been pushing. Not to get her arrested, just to keep my own head. I pressed my palms together until my fingers hurt. "You could have told me before. I was scared you'd tell her to keep the peace." I opened my mouth to protest and then closed it. He wasn't wrong. I had spent my life tilting toward the heaviest gravity in the room, and usually that had been Clara. "She's going to make this worse if she thinks you're in danger," I said. He nodded. "That's why I need your help." It took me a beat to realize he wasn't asking for money or food, though I made a mental note to bring both. His eyes were steady and clearer than I'd seen them in months. "I need you to tell the police I'm okay. But I don't want Mom and Dad to know where I am yet. If they know, Clara will know. If Clara knows, this whole thing becomes a morality play where she gets to rescue me from the consequences she created. People don't get to just opt out of missing person cases, I said. I don't want to stay missing, he said quietly. I want to be found by someone who sees me. Something inside me loosened. Maybe it was the part that had kneaded itself into a hard ball to survive the last 3 months. Maybe it was the part that was always a little girl counting sparrows on the fence and naming them so they felt less alone. Okay, I said. We do this carefully. We do it right. Detective Patel met me at the station that afternoon, her hair pulled back, her face a map where empathy and skepticism had learned to share space. I told her I had new information and asked if we could speak privately. She took me to a small room with a table too big for the space. I didn't give her the exact location, just enough for the law and reason to feel satisfied. He was alive, he was safe, he did not want to come home yet. He would contact her within 48 hours to confirm identity and voluntary status. He requested that his whereabouts not be shared with anyone outside law enforcement for now. I said the words like I'd rehearsed them because I had, in the car, 100 times, until they were mine. Why not your parents? She asked. Not accusatory. Curious the way a person is when they've seen every version of a story and want to know which one is sitting in front of them. Because love is loud in our house, I said. And he needs quiet. She studied me. And your sister? I met her eyes. She wants to help. But her version of help is comprehensive. Patel nodded once, and I could see her fitting that sentence into the shapes she'd seen in other houses. Can you put him on the phone now? No, I said. He'll call you. He's paranoid about being followed. She considered that, then slid a card across the table. He has 48 hours to contact me directly. If he does, and if he confirms he's safe and not being coerced, we can mark him located and keep the details limited. But if he doesn't? I understand. She tapped the card with her finger. Tell him I don't care about family politics. I care that he's breathing. I will, I said, and meant it. Outside the station, the sky had the washed-out color it gets before a storm. I texted Theo the number. He texted back a single thumbs up, which should have annoyed me and instead undid me, because it was so ordinary for him I almost forgot why we were doing any of this. He called her that evening from a prepaid phone. Later, she'd tell me he answered every verification question calmly and cracked a joke at the end about the hold music. He's all right, she said. Not happy. Not stable. But all right. The official report shifted from missing/endangered youth to located, voluntary absence. The flyers came down. The dog teams stopped searching the woods like the woods had personally offended them. The neighbors went back to talking about their gutters. At our house, silence peeled away in sheets and left something raw behind. Mom slept for 12 hours straight and woke up sobbing when she remembered why her body had let her. Dad went outside and dug a hole he didn't need for a tree he hadn't bought yet. Clara came over with flowers and a smile that trembled at the edges. We did it, she said. He's safe. We didn't, I said. He did. Her eyes sharpened. You know where he is? No. Are you lying? No. She laughed then, a small, disbelieving sound that scratched the air. You always were better at being underestimated than I was. I felt tired down in my bones. Clara, I said. He needs space. So he can spiral in peace? So he can breathe. And you think he won't disappear for good? I think if we keep trying to make him into something that proves we're good people, we'll never see him at all. Her mouth softened in a way that made me hate her less and ache more. I'm trying to fix it, she whispered. I know, I whispered back. That's the problem. She put the flowers on the counter and left without taking off her coat. Over the next weeks, life reassembled itself into a version of a life. I went to work. Mom started seeing a therapist who taught her how to say sentences that began with I feel instead of you always. Dad stopped locking the liquor cabinet because he stopped needing to. He cried once, really cried, not the angry version that looks like steam escaping, and then he made dinner and pretended the onions were the reason his eyes were red. Clara texted me occasionally, any news? Thinking of you. Did you see the article about voluntary missing cases? After a while, I found a support group. Do you want to go? Sometimes I typed out answers and erased them. Sometimes I said, not today. Once, I wrote I'm glad you're trying and meant it in 3 different ways at once. Theo stayed at the storage unit 2 more weeks, then moved to a room above a garage belonging to a friend of Marco's. He sent me the address with the caveat don't share and a picture of the view from the window, a field with 3 horses who did not care about him at all, which was the point. I brought him groceries and a second-hand space heater that didn't smell like a dying toaster. We talked about stupid things because stupid things are ballast when everything else wants to fly off the table. He told me stories about customers at the shop who swore their cars made a duck noise and then did a terrible impression of a duck. I told him about a coworker who labeled the office microwave not for fish and caused a political schism. Sometimes we didn't talk. We just sat and listened to the horses snort out in the cold and let not talking be the conversation we hadn't known how to have. He called Detective Patel every other Friday for a month to confirm he was still okay. It's weird, he said once, fiddling with his lighter. Having someone in the system care if I keep breathing. She does, I said. So do I. He looked at me sideways. You always did. You just didn't know what to do with it. I'm learning, I said. He nodded, satisfied in the way people are when the thing they suspected but didn't want to say out loud gets said. The confrontation with Clara happened because of a wrench. I'd almost forgotten about it, the one with his initials carved into the handle that she'd taken from the garage. It was one of those objects that doesn't matter to anyone but the person who made the mark. The kind of thing that stands in for 1,000 things you can't say. I was at her apartment dropping off a book Mom wanted back. Clara was in sweats and an old t-shirt from a charity 5K. The place was clean in the way a hotel room is clean, nothing out, everything in its place, personality worn like a scent instead of furniture. The wrench was on her bookshelf between a framed diploma and a candle that smelled like grapefruit. My eyes went to it like a magnet. You kept it. She followed my gaze. Something in her face flickered, guilt, or defensiveness, or both dressed as practicality. I wanted a piece of him in case, I don't know. In case this all ended wrong. You stole it. I borrowed it. Clara. She crossed her arms. If you know where he is and you won't tell me, the least you can do is let me have something tangible. This isn't about you having something, I said. It's about you taking something because you can. Her jaw tightened. You're acting like I'm the villain. I'm acting like I learned to tell the difference between help and control. Silence stretched. I could hear her refrigerator humming like a lie it told itself to sleep. Finally she said, very quietly, do you know how hard it is to be good? To be the person everyone expects? Do you know what happens if I stop? Everything falls apart. I think things fell apart anyway. She laughed and it sounded like glass. So now you're his hero. No, I said, I'm his sister. She stared at me a long time, and for a moment I saw the kid who used to braid my hair and tuck me in, not because someone was watching but because it calmed her own fear of the dark. Her mouth trembled. She reached for the wrench, hesitated, and then pressed it into my hands without speaking. It was heavier than I remembered. I traced the initials with my thumb, clumsy scratches that made a neat tool honest. The metal was cold. I put it in my bag. Thank you, I said. She nodded. Tell him I'm trying not to try. I will, I said, and I did. The hopeful part is small at first. I'm not going to lie and tell you everything wrapped up like a TV season finale and we all learned a neat lesson with a sweeping score. The hopeful part is more like light under a door that you didn't know could open. My parents started attending family therapy without us. Sometimes Mom called afterward, excited and terrified, saying, "We talked about enmeshment," like she'd just named a new planet they might get to visit. Dad started sanding the old birdhouse in the backyard like a penance nobody asked for. He says it's for the wrens, but I think he's trying to make a home for something he can't hold. Clara began sending me short texts that sounded like admissions without demanding forgiveness. I told my support group I use the word protect when I mean control. I didn't realize I sounded like Mom talking through me. I want to be a sister, not a brand. No hearts. No emojis. Just punctuation doing the work. Theo got a job at a different shop under a different name for the first month, not because he was in hiding, but because he wanted to see who he was when he wasn't the family problem child applying for sympathy. It turned out he was a guy who showed up on time and made terrible coffee and could listen to an engine and say, "It's not the belt. It's the sigh it makes before it pulls." Sometimes he still texted me at 2 a.m. because nights are loud when you're alone with yourself. Sometimes I didn't answer until morning because I'm learning that caring doesn't have to be immediate to be real. On a Sunday in late spring, we met at a diner off the highway where the waitresses called everyone hon and the floor was sticky in a way that felt like comfort. He slid into the booth, picked up my wrist like he was checking my pulse, and said, "You look less gray." I laughed. "Patel says hi," I said. "She says if you don't want to call every other Friday anymore, you don't have to." "Maybe I'll call her anyway sometimes," he said. "Not because I have to. Because it reminds me of staying put." We ate pancakes with too much syrup. He told me a story about a guy who brought in a car that rattled like a pocketful of bones and then acted surprised when they found a literal bag of bolts in the trunk. I told him Clara had given back the wrench. He went quiet and stared at his coffee. "I don't hate her," he said finally. "I just can't be under her." "She's trying," I said. "I know," he said, and he meant it the way I had, 3 different ways at once. I handed him the wrench under the table like contraband. He turned it over, thumb digging into the scratches like he was reading Braille. After a minute he pulled a small piece of leather from his pocket, threaded it through the handle, and looped it at my wrist. "Keep it," he said. "Not because I won't. Because when I see it on you, I remember I'm more than a problem to solve." The weight of it settled against my skin in a way that felt like a promise I could keep. We went outside into the bright and the loud. The highway roared. A child in the parking lot shrieked at a dog who was not interested in being shrieked at. Theo squinted at the sky and said, "You think the horses miss me when I'm not there?" "They miss the peanut butter you keep feeding them when you shouldn't," I said. He grinned, teeth flashing like a boy again. "You telling me I can't?" "I'm telling you I'll buy you carrots like a responsible adult." "Deal," he said. "You want a neat ending." "I get it. I want one too." The truth is, we're still in the middle of the book where the paper is smudged from being held too long. The detectives closed the case file with a notation that said located in safe and a line below that said family dynamics, complicated but improving, which is either the saddest or the funniest bureaucratic sentence I've ever read. Clara and I meet for coffee in public places because we behave better near muffins. Sometimes we make it 20 minutes without talking about Theo. Sometimes we fail. She doesn't ask for his address now. She asks how I am instead, and her eyes look at me instead of through me. She says she's learning how to be average on purpose. She says it as if it's a new sport she might take up. Mom has started a garden. She plants things and then leaves them alone, which I think might be the bravest thing she's done. Dad built a new workbench in the garage and didn't label the drawers because he said it was okay to have to open a few to find what you need. Sometimes at night I still stand by the window and try to hear the dirt bike. The silence is different now. Not emptiness. Space. When I told Theo I was writing this, he laughed and said, "Make me look cool." I told him he only gets to be honest. He made a face, the one that means fair and rude at the same time, and then he said, "Tell them I'm trying not to run. Tell them that's new." So here it is, the confession I didn't know I was headed toward when the engine coughed that last Thursday night and I smiled into my phone and let the moment pass. I am the middle child, the one who learned to be quiet so the ends wouldn't fray. I am the one who kept the peace until peace became an alibi. My sister is not a villain. She is a person who built an identity out of being good and then used it like a tool she forgot could also cut. My brother is not a screw-up. He is a person who mistook chaos for oxygen and is teaching his lungs a new way. I don't have a perfect bow to put on that. I have a small metal weight against my wrist and a habit of listening to the creak. I have a phone that buzzes every other Friday with a call that says, in its own way, "I'm still here." I have mornings where the air smells like oil and wet earth and something like joy. The hopeful part is also the hard part. We don't get to be the people we were in the story we were told. We have to become the ones we can live with. Sometimes that means not telling your sister where your brother sleeps. Sometimes it means handing back a wrench. Sometimes it means learning to love people in ways that don't make you the main character. Last week, I met Theo by the Iron Bridge. He had carrots in his pocket and guilt about them in his eyes. We walked the creek bed like we used to, balancing on slick rocks, daring each other not to fall. He whistled a bird call without remembering which bird it was, and I rolled my eyes and did it right. A sparrow flitted from the sumac and landed on the railing, head cocked, as if listening for a story. Theo touched my wrist where the metal warmed to my skin and said, "Guide me home, okay?" "Okay," I said, and this time I meant somewhere we both could breathe.